What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the FF Ballbusters podcast. Thank you for joining us. My name is Eric. That is my co-host Will. How you feeling this morning, man?
Hey man, I'm feeling good. Ready to go over and finish up these positional rankings and tiers. Definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, well, almost finished. We're doing tight ends today, and we still have running backs to do. We're kind of
True.
intentionally leaving that for last because there's been some contract disputes. There's potentially some injuries that are going to go on, so we're going to leave that as our last position group next week. If you're interested in that, stick around with us, subscribe, check it out. Um, but yeah, you mentioned we're talking tight ends today. Really volatile position. Obviously, the guys at the top are the difference makers, and then it gets pretty questionable pretty fast. But I think today should be pretty interesting. My rankings are pretty different than the consensus rankings that I looked up on Fantasy Pros. I don't know about you, but obviously, we'll have a discussion. We'll talk about it real quickly before we get into any of that. Just want to encourage you guys to please subscribe to our channel. We are a smaller channel. We're trying to grow. We have a subscriber goal to get to of 500 subscribers before the season starts. So if you could help us make that happen, that would be fantastic. We are your one-stop shop for all of your fantasy needs. As we get closer to draft season, we're doing these positional breakdowns like we're doing today. We got mock drafts. We have sleepers. We have draft strategy that's going to come out. We have all sorts of things to get you guys ready for draft season. So stick with us, subscribe to the channel, and let's have some fun.
Hell yeah.
All right. So let's start at the top. Pretty clear, pretty obvious. Who is your number one tight end?
It's Travis Kelsey. It's pretty much the guy who almost should be in a tier by himself. I'm not sure if you have him in a tier by himself, but he should almost be in
I
one if he's
do.
not. Yeah. So pretty
Yeah.
much 7 straight years of over 1,000 yards, which is unheard of. I don't think any other tight end has ever had over four. So the fact that he's going at that rate, he's
Yeah.
already on a historic rate. Last year he set career highs in targets, catches, and touchdowns. In terms of yards, it was his second best year, and we have no indication that that's going to slow down anytime going forward. There's a huge gap between him and whoever's next up, really. So Travis Kelsey definitely deserves to be up in this S tier.
Yeah, he's been what the tight end one for six of the last 7 years.
Hmm.
Last year he finished with a gap of what like over 60 points in terms of total fantasy points and over 4 points in points per game between him and the second best tight end in fantasy. So yeah, the positional advantage is massive. I think with this episode, since we're only doing the top 12 tight ends, where we've been doing 24 for the other positions, we can probably talk a little bit of strategy as well.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, in drafts this year, Travis Kelsey is going in the top end or middle of the first round. I think he's proven year over year, like we just mentioned, that he's deserving of being picked that early. In the mock drafts that I've done and in the best ball drafts that I've done, I typically just don't like my team's roster construction when I take Travis Kelsey in the first round. It's probably worth it, but I don't know. Things get ugly pretty quick when you don't take a running back or a wide receiver in that first round.
Now you're definitely leaving things way more up to chance, especially with that wide receiver position and waiting longer and longer because that does really start to diminish after a while. Especially just looking at this year's group. But yeah, with Travis Kelsey, I've even seen some tweets of people saying he's like the 101 stuff like that, where it's just you do get a huge positional advantage. I will say with Travis Kelsey on the team. But like you said, I'm not sure if it's worth taking the hits that you're going to take everywhere else if you do take a Travis Kelsey.
Yeah, it's a balancing act for sure. And you mentioned some people calling him the 101. It's also going to depend on format. Like if you're playing in tight end premium leagues,
Hmm.
obviously all of these guys are going to go in a slightly different spot. I think we'll probably talk about value ranges in standard leagues where there's not a tight end premium. That's kind of going to be our baseline, and maybe we can reference tight end premium here and there. But that'll be our talking point for today. But yeah, Travis Kelsey, clear, far and away tight end one. Um, he is in a tier of his own for me. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then the next guy, I don't think there's going to be any argument here either. It's going to be Mark Andrews in the A
Hmm.
tier.
Absolutely agree.
Um, yeah, the only guy in the past 7 years to actually be the tight end one and challenge Mark Andrews for that top spot. And I think he comes into this year with probably the highest upside for this entire offense, but for him in general, that they've had throughout his tenure in Baltimore. Todd Monken comes in as the new offensive coordinator. We're going to see a much higher pass volume there. We're probably going to see a lot higher pace as well. I think some people are letting that slip by the wayside. That with Baltimore being a crazy high run volume team, they were also a slow pace team. Um, so we're going to see an increase in both passing volume and pace, which should lead to more plays. They're going to be on the field for longer, and Mark Andrews is still clearly, even with the much improved wide receiver core, the best receiving option on the team.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And like you said, like over that span that he was healthy and he was playing last year, he was absolutely on fire. So just him
Yeah,
staying healthy and being out there on the field is enough to bump him up for sure.
yeah, and he was where was he at? I guess he was third in points per game last year, and that was with missing a lot of games without Lamar Jackson. He was third in targets and receptions as well. And that was also while playing two less games than Kelsey and TJ Hawkinson. So even last year, he was still a fantastic tight end and a difference maker. I expect him to be healthy. I expect Lamar Jackson to be healthy, and I expect this offense to take a big step up. Um, for me, he's also in a tier of his own.
Yeah, I agree because I got a lot of these next guys grouped up in this B tier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same. And then strategy wise here, we mentioned Travis Kelsey being so far and away from the rest of the group, and I do agree that he's the only one deserving of being that first round pick. But I think Mark Andrews, with the offensive changes coming into Baltimore, I think he can. I think he can be close. I think the gap is smaller than it probably has been in years past. And roster construction wise, like we mentioned, I find it a lot easier to take Mark Andrews at the very back end of the second, or a lot of times early to mid third round, and build a more complete and well rounded roster with a top tier tight end like Mark Andrews.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I also think that, just being able to have somebody like Mark Andrews on your team should benefit you a lot. Like you said, with roster construction, there's more target competition in Baltimore this year, but it's a different set. It's just a different type of target competition, different type of offense. And with that being
Yeah,
said, out of everybody out there, Mark Andrews is probably the most trusted target out of everyone. So just because there is target competition doesn't mean that means Mark Andrews is going to lose his volume in any way, really. I think it's going to stay the same going forward.
yeah, I completely agree. All right, so we got two guys in a tier of their own to start it off in the S and the A tier. We go to the B tier, and who is going to lead it off for you?
So I was looking at Mr. TJ Hawkinson to start off this tier. I don't really have
Okay.
them ranked too much because, like I said, a lot of these guys are kind of interchangeable for me in terms of how I feel like they're going to produce. But TJ Hawkinson obviously recently went to the Minnesota Vikings, and among that stretch from like week 9 to the end of last season, he was second amongst all tight ends in targets, catches, and yards, only behind Kelsey. And his
Yeah.
21.8% share of their targets was like third at that position at the time as well. So, in terms of him going to Minnesota, he instantly became a very used option. Of course, they have Justin Jefferson there. They brought in Jordan Addison this year as well. And I think Jordan Addison is going to make a push for targets. But with that being said, Hawkinson's already kind of efficient. He's already proven, and he has been a guy there that has kind of earned that trust. And he definitely earned that trust over that stretch because they used him a ton. He ran the most routes in the league over that span of time as well, 36.1 per game. So they're out there using him in the passing game as well. They want to get him involved, and they showed us they wanted nothing but to get him more involved when they got him. So I think that if Hawkinson's able to find some sort of balance between that volume and a little bit more efficiency, he should take off this year.
Yeah, I agree with basically everything you're saying, and I think he's not my tight end three,
Hmm.
but I think he's definitely the safest option at tight end three. And honestly, if I had to bet on the most likely option to finish there, it would probably be T.J. Hawkinson.
Hmm.
Um, the guy that I have there is Darren Waller.
Okay.
Um, I'm pretty high on him this year. He's certainly not going as high as T.J. Hawkinson is, and so you can get him at a discount. Um, and I think people are people are convinced that he's washed. I don't think he's washed. I think there's a high likelihood that he deals with injuries throughout the season, and that's the risk that you run drafting a guy like Darren Waller. He hasn't played a full season in quite some time. Um, but I think he's still got the juice left in the tank. It's just he went from being the guy in Oakland, and he was, a top three tight end consistently year over year, to having Devontae Adams come in a low pass volume, low efficiency offense, and so there just wasn't a ton to go around when you have Devontae Adams taking literally 180 targets last year. Um, and so that I think that's more reason for his decline than anything else. He comes to the Giants this year. He gets, a creative, offensive-minded head coach in Brian Daboll that's shown us that he can get his best weapons the ball in space, give them the best opportunity to succeed. And Darren Waller is by far and away their best receiving option there in New York.
No, I absolutely agree. I think that one of the things people don't look at a whole lot for Darren Waller as well, like you said, with them adding Devontae Adams, his role in that offense also changed quite a bit. They started using him as more of a
Yeah.
field stretcher, as instead of more of an intermediate route. Just taking a look at his dip from 2021 to 2022 in terms of short target percentage, it went from 61.3% to 46.5%, whereas deep targets went
Wow.
from 15.1% to 32.6%. So with that being said,
Damn.
having Daniel Jones at quarterback, someone who, as of last year, they're not really letting them stretch the ball down the field too much, not letting them take too many chances. Those intermediate targets are going to become a lot more valuable. And with somebody like Darren Waller, who's shown in the past that he can handle that, it may also help keep him a little bit healthier if he's catching some of those more intermediate routes, not quite going for as many, acrobatic catches, not trying to make plays happen down the field. If he's working in that more intermediate section, he might be able to find a little bit more success and more long-term success.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a significant difference. That's a good stat pull. I hadn't looked at that, but I like that. And then yeah, just some other quick things to note, like Josh McDaniels. I just think he sucks as a coach, and so the upgrade from him to Brian Dable, I think, is going to be massive and something that you're going to see. Target competition, like I talked about, is going to be vastly different. Like the wide receiver core in New York is just a hodgepodge of random names and slot receivers. So yeah, I think we could see a huge bump for Darren Waller this year. And then I only have one more guy left in this tier. Is it the same for you?
I did also, yeah. Would
Who's
that
that
be
guy for you?
would that be Mr. Kittle for you as well, George?
It would.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let's talk about it. Mr. Kittle over here is this is just Mr. King of the Boom Week for real.
Yeah.
Last year,
Yeah.
last year he had 6 games as a top six scorer. 4 of those were good enough for him to be first or second in points scored. So when he booms big. And just on the low weeks in this, we have to also look at the fact there's going to be some low weeks as well. So that's probably the thing that
Yeah.
kind of bumps him down the ratings as much as it does. The weeks that are great, he's going to be amazing. But also, this is a team where if they can get away with running the ball every single play and not throw the ball to people, they will. And they've shown that, they got Christian McCaffrey, so they may have some more success in that than more often than not. So there's going to be some weeks
Yeah.
where there's going to be some low weeks with low passing volume, and there's going to be just an up and down with George Kittle. That's the only thing that kind of bumps him down. He's not going to be consistently great every week, but as a player himself, he's going to be out there on the field, and he's going to be playing as long as he's healthy. So in terms of like statistics, I don't really have much. I mean, it's George Kittle. It's the 49ers. We've seen what he does every single year. But it's just a matter of how willing are you to go on that ride and hope that he's going to boom on the weeks you need him to.
Yeah. You mentioned it's George Kittle, and that's the truth. Like if we were talking just best tight end on the planet, it's probably George Kittle in terms of all around game for the NFL. He's probably the best we have. But from a fantasy perspective, you mentioned he's not going to be consistent. Outside of those top, really two guys, nobody's going to be consistent, and so it's
Hmm.
hard to ask for that necessarily. I think the boom weeks speak for themselves, like you mentioned, and I think that's reason enough to draft him. But the things that are scaring me away are one, the quarterback situation. Uh, Brock Purdy is probably going to be the starter, and now NFL teams are going to have tape on him, and so I feel like maybe his kind of Cinderella story is going to come to an end at least a little bit. He might not be terrible, but he might not be quite as good as he was last year. Um, we know that George Kittle is a great blocker, and he's used as an inline blocker a ton. And so that's going to continue throughout the season. And then the biggest thing for me is that he doubled up his highest touchdown total of his career last year with 11. Prior to that, his highest was 6. Just to read off his entire career, he's had 2, 5, 5, 2, 6, and then last year he went to 11. I expect that to regress back down to the mean. And so his total production and those week by week boom weeks, I think they're going to come down a little bit from last year. I still think he's a high end and viable starting tight end, but that's why I have him at the bottom of this group.
No, I think that does make sense. I think that does make a lot of sense because, like, with regression and stuff like that, and him not scoring as many touchdowns next year, there's going to be a point dip off. But you're hoping that maybe he gets more efficient with his targets, and it's like it's
Right.
the George Kittle ride with San Francisco, really.
Yeah. And so let's talk about some strategy within this tier here. From what I've noticed, again, in standard formats, non tight end premium leagues, TJ Hawkinson is typically going around that 4 or 5 turn, I guess probably closer to the early fifth round.
Hmm.
George Kittle is going kind of the end of the fifth, early sixth. And then Darren Waller is going even later than that, like, middle, late sixth. I've seen him even slip into the seventh round sometimes. And so, from just a cost perspective, Darren Waller is easily my favorite of the group.
Yeah, me personally, if I was building a team right now, I would love to get one of these guys in the B tier, and then maybe even one of the young guys later on, like a Sam Laporta or a Michael Mayer, somebody that might develop throughout the season and kind of build up some sort of consistency throughout it, like just to have another option. But
Yeah.
having one of those guys is not bad for your team whatsoever.
Yeah, I think especially if you go with the Waller route, you're going to need to have a second tight end
Hmm.
ready in case he goes down. Even with Kittle, Kittle has shown that he's had some injuries throughout his career. T.J. Hawkinson probably the safest, just in regards to injury. We haven't seen him go down quite as much, but yeah, I have the same thought where if you grab a Kittle or a Waller in that fifth or sixth round, you're probably looking to come back with like a Greg Dulcich, Dalton Kincaid, somebody in that kind of category that we'll be talking about here at the end of this tier list. But I think that'll wrap up the B tier for us. Let's move on to the C tier. Um, I imagine we're going to agree on this one. The first guy in this tier for me is going to be Dallas Goddard.
Yes, absolutely.
So I don't have a ton to say. This is just an offense that I want to buy into. Obviously they took a huge leap last year. Jalen Hurts took a jump up. We saw what AJ Brown kind of infused into that offense. They were incredibly efficient, incredibly high scoring, and I think hopefully they were coming off of last year with the easiest schedule in the NFL, and so
Hmm.
basically in the second half they didn't have to try. And so, most of the fantasy production was coming from the first half. It's going to be a much more difficult road this year. And so hopefully we see full games worth of production from this group. And I think that's kind of what I'm banking on here for Dallas Goddard is because there's so many mouths to feed and really, really talented mouths at that. Like you have AJ Brown, you have Devonta Smith, who came on very strong at the end of last year. Um, and so Dallas Goddard, I think, is deserving and will get a prominent role in this offense. But we're going to need to see more pass volume sustained throughout the game in order for him to be consistent week to week.
Absolutely. And just to show that, he does get things done after the catch as well. In terms of yards after the catch or yards per catch after the reception, he had 7.6, which was fourth, and third amongst all tight ends in yards after the catch with 420, even though he missed 5 games. So if he's able to get the ball out in space, he can make something happen with it. And just to kind of piggyback off of what you said for that second half of the game where they just wouldn't really have to do anything, Dallas Goddard last year had 26 second half targets, which was 121st in the NFL.
Oh my God, 26 total targets in the second half.
26 total targets
Oh
in the
my
second half.
goodness.
So if that's
That's
even
insane.
if that's even able to go up a little bit, we should see a good amount of improvement out of Dallas Goddard. But like you said, they're coming off the easiest schedule. They won a lot of games, so they were riding hot for a lot of the season. We'll see what happens
Yeah.
this year at the beginning. We'll see if they have to compete a little bit more. And like you said, I think they're going to have to as well. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're talking about a guy that even last year missing those games and kind of not, I wouldn't say being replaced, but probably, taking a slight step down in the pecking order with Devonta Smith at the second half of the season.
Hmm.
He was still the tight end five in points per game. And like you mentioned with all of the yak stats and stuff like that, he was used really creatively around the line of scrimmage with lots of tight end screens and stuff like that. So that was very encouraging to see. Um, who is your tight end seven?
My tight end seven is somebody that I'm nervous to put on this list every single year because I feel like they're supposed to do well, but they don't. It's Mr. Kyle Pitts. Um,
Yeah.
so we're gonna have a discussion about it because Kyle Pitts, in terms of athletic measurables, you guys have heard it time and time again. He's one of the best we've ever seen, if not the best we've ever seen. Blah blah blah. Let's get past it. He's on the Atlanta Falcons. We've seen every single
Yeah.
training camp video. None of these passes have been accurate. We've seen
Yeah.
videos of Kyle Pitts who's not quite looking like he's ready to be back from the injury. So that's a little scary. And also, just in terms of his usage, they're using this guy like, I don't know, like it's weird. I can only think of it in other sports terms. It's like having LeBron James and trying to turn him into a corner shooter is what they're doing with Kyle Pitts. I feel like
Yeah.
when they could just use him
Yeah.
everywhere in the field, they try to use him as more of a deep target, stuff like that, and that really kind of kills his efficiency. It kind of kills him as a player, really, because his air yards are huge and potential air yards are huge. Potential yardage, expected points are gigantic, but they're not connecting because he doesn't have anyone really back there to get the ball to him. Now, with that being
Yeah.
said, they are trying like hell to get the ball to him when he's out there on the field. He's got like a 25 to 30% target share in this field, in this backfield, but or not in this backfield, in this offense. But they just can't really
Yeah.
get the ball to him, and I'm hoping that can change. I'm hoping Desmond Ritter kind of takes a step up and can get the ball more accurately out there. Also hoping that Kyle Pitts can find some sort of stride in terms of full health before the season starts. I don't think it's super accurate at
Yeah.
this point that he will, just from looking at the video and the eye test. But as the season ramps along, he should get more and more comfortable. But his deployment in this team is really going to have to change before I can bump him up in ratings. So I feel like this is fair to have him here just based off of the ceiling.
I couldn't agree more. Everything you said, I think, is spot on. I have him one spot lower, but in this tier. Yeah, the ceiling potential is there. We saw him his rookie year put up 1,000 yards. He has that well within his range of outcomes. He's the most talented from just like a pure receiver perspective, probably tight end in the entire league. But yeah, there's a ton of red flags and question marks here. We saw him play most of the year last year with Marcus Mariota, and I guess he didn't even really play that much with Ritter because he went down with the MCL injury
Hmm.
prior to that switch happening. Um, so you mentioned he was legit first in the NFL amongst tight ends in air yards and like all of those potential downfield stats and stuff like that. But the completion percentage, his catch rate was so low. It was like around 50%, if that, because Mariota was so inaccurate. And like you mentioned, all of the training camp videos, it's not like Ritter's looking that much better. Tons of throws behind him, over him, interceptions galore. That's all we're seeing out of the Falcons training camp right now. So I don't have high hopes for Ritter improving much on that. And we've seen a lot of good things out of Drake London as well. Like obviously there aren't too many other places for the ball to go, so it's not like one guy is going to take everything away from Kyle Pitts, but I expect Drake London to have, 26, 27, 28% target share in this offense,
I will say
and
we've
it's
seen
going to be low
some
volume.
we see some great stuff out of Bijan as well. In terms of him lining up
Yeah,
out wide, him lining up, running out the backfield, he's been doing great back there too. So he should take away from that target share as well.
that's true. So yeah, just even more things to consider there. The ceiling floor gap for Kyle Pitts, I think, is huge, and it's scary. I haven't been taking much of them in mock drafts and best ball drafts and stuff like that. I'm kind of scared off. In Dynasty, I'm still buying in, but yeah, this is a tough sell for me.
Yeah, I think you could quite literally park a bus in that differential. To be honest with you, like,
Yeah, no, I agree. Um, but yeah, so that'll do it for Kyle Pitts. I do have him in the tier, but the guy that I have one spot ahead of him is going to be Evan Ingram. Um, really high on this Jaguars offense this year and what they're going to be able to do. Um, for me and just for our purposes, I'm thinking of this
give
as
me
Trevor Lawrence's.
give me 1 second. I accidentally closed out this fucking tier list like a jackass.
You're good. You're
All right,
good.
there we go. We're back. We're back.
All right, I'll just restart from Evan Ingram.
Appreciate it.
Um, no, you're good. Um, so for me, the next guy that I had up on the list was Evan Ingram. Um, I'm just really high on what this Jaguars offense is going to look like this year. For my purposes, I'm kind of thinking of this as Trevor Lawrence's sophomore year, not his third season. We'll just kick that Urban Meyer year out of our brain. We don't need to think about that. And so I think he had a fantastic quote unquote rookie year last year. I think he's going to build on that coming into this year. This is going to be their second year under the new coaching regime, and so I think he's going to be even more comfortable. He's gonna have even more command of the offense. I think they're probably going to let him open it up a little bit more. They were still fairly run heavy last year, so I think we're going to see even more pass attempts coming into this year. And Evan Ingram specifically was fantastic. He was used in really, really creative ways, similar to Dallas Goedert. Lots of tight end screens, lots of usage in the red zone. And so if we see anything close to that again, I think he could even outperform this ranking that we have here. The only concern is that Calvin Ridley comes in, and I think he demands a very high target share in this offense. Christian Kirk is still there. Zay Jones, we'll see where he kind of gets pushed to in the pecking order, but I would expect Evan Ingram to be like the third target in this offense.
No, I absolutely agree. I think that and then, something that you want from tight ends as well is that spike week potential. I think Evan Ingram has that at a very high amount. And
Absolutely.
I think, like you said, Calvin Ridley being there may take away from targets from Evan Ingram, possibly, in some sort of trickle down fashion. But all in all, that should open up the offense more because there's more people you got to key in
Yeah.
on. You can't really key in on anybody in specific. And if Evan Ingram's out to run wild out there, oh yeah, that makes for some fun offense for sure.
Yeah, I forgot to even bring that up. It's a fantastic point. Like Calvin Ridley, we've talked about it a couple times on this channel, is like he provides something this offense didn't have before. They didn't have like a true outside alpha X receiver, and it's weird to think about Calvin Ridley that way because he is a slider build. He's not, your typical outside guy, but he's more than capable of beating press, and he will absolutely stretch defenses vertically, which didn't really have an option like that in Jacksonville last year. So yeah, the ability to stretch the field, I think, is going to open up so much for everybody else underneath.
Absolutely. Um,
Um,
what's up?
you got it.
Yeah. Taking a look at the next player I've got on this tier, I've got Mr. Fryermuth. I know
Okay.
you're not super high on Steelers players, which makes sense, but we can talk about it a little bit. So I know he didn't score a lot of touchdowns last year, kind of a common theme for the Steelers last year in terms of receiving, not a whole lot of receiving touchdowns. But his targets or his yards per catch jumped up from 8.3 yards per catch and 6.3 yards per target to 11.6 yards per catch and 7.5 yards per target. So the quality of targets has gone up, and the fact that he does have like a 22% share in this offense is awesome. The fact that he is heavily targeted in this offense, he is a key part of it. And he averaged 1.69 yards per route run, which was seventh in the NFL. In terms of his target share, 22.6, he was seventh amongst tight ends. So he does get the volume of a high-end tight end. It's just a matter of Kenny Pickett, if he's able to take that step up. I have kind of liked the reports I've seen out of training camp about Kenny Pickett kind of making smarter throws, this and that. Of course, there's some interception troubles going on out there as well. I feel like that's always going to happen out there. It's kind of happening with some of the best quarterbacks as well. But
Yeah.
in terms of Pat Fryermuth, how I think he's going to develop, I think he's just going to keep getting better and better. I know he only had 2 touchdowns last year, but the year prior he had 7 as a rookie. So I'm feeling like there's some sort of regression in between that as to what his true numbers are going to look like, but that's all conjecture. I believe in Pat Fryermuth as a player. The only biggest question mark we had for him after his rookie year was him being able to stay healthy, and he was able to do that last year, majority of last season. So that concern is kind of out the window
Yeah.
for me, and I'm looking forward to Pat Fryermuth this season.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of good points. So I didn't have him in this tier, and I didn't have him as my next tight end, but I can definitely see the argument for it. You mentioned the tight end regression in a positive direction with only 2 last year. I do expect that to go up. Um, Even though I am not a big believer in Kenny Pickett, I do expect him to improve on what we saw from him last year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think obviously that's going to help and aid in Pat Fryermuth's production. He's probably, it kind of depends on your preference at the position. He's as close to, a consistent week to week producer as you're going to get this low in the tight end rankings.
Mm-hmm.
His variance in point scoring by week was actually pretty good. Um, I just like if the high end production we're talking about, and I'm looking at his last year finishes, like his highest finish in half PPR scoring, I think was 12 points, lots of 10-point games, a couple of 11-point games sprinkled in here and there. But that's the highest you're gonna get. I just kind of prefer the guys that could potentially win you weeks or provide you with more than that.
Mm-hmm.
because I know you can't count on consistency from these guys down here anyway. So for me, I had a tier break after the Pitts Ingram Goddard tier,
Okay.
but I had David Njoku listed next.
Okay.
Um, so how do we want to compromise here? Because I can understand Fryermuth being in that C tier, and I think if we look at the consensus ranks, he's definitely in that group as well. Who else do I have in here? We can probably make a separation after that. I'm fine with if you want to throw Njoku at the back end of the C tier, we can probably call it after that and go to the D tier.
Okay. I like that. I like that.
You like it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I like
So I'm
that.
gonna throw Njoku up here, and we can talk about him a little bit. Um, so this one's gonna hinge a lot on the improvement of Deshaun Watson. If we can get him anywhere near what he had been, from 2020 and before that, where he was an MVP caliber, top of the league type quarterback, then I think we're going to see huge things from David Njoku. There's not a ton of target competition. You have Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore there. And then David Njoku fills a role that I don't think either of them really do. Elijah Moore is going to be kind of that short to intermediate playmaker, which I guess is the same area of the field that David Njoku is, but he's a much bigger body tight end. He provides kind of that over the top ability that you don't see from Elijah Moore, and I think he's probably going to be the primary red zone target for this offense as well. So I do expect a big tick up in touchdowns from David Njoku as well this year.
Absolutely. Like you said, last year was kind of a breakout year for him. We finally got what we were waiting for out of David Njoku.
Yeah,
And he was more successful with Jacoby Brissett, like you said. 78.8% of catches were caught and 8.9 yards per target compared to 60.7% and 5.9 yards per target. But again, that is literally with the worst version of Deshaun Watson we've ever seen in his career.
yeah,
So we're hoping that he can at least get a little bit better than that. And he showed flashes of getting better than that towards the end of last season as well. So I think with a full offseason
right.
under his belt, I think the ceiling for Njoku is it can get immense, like you said, if Watson is able to play at that level he was before.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that is going to round out the C tier, the biggest group that we have on the list. As far as strategy goes for the guys in this tier, uh, the way that I've been trying to draft my teams is I either want Mark Andrews in the third. If I can't get him, I'm hoping to get Waller in the sixth. Most of the time, I'm accomplishing that goal, and so
Hmm.
by then, I'm not really worried about the C group of tight ends, and I'm waiting until after that to pick up a second one. And if I have Mark Andrews, I'm waiting until even after that tier because I'm not worried about what his production is going to be week to week. Um, are you kind of seeing the same thing, or are you targeting more of these guys in the C tier?
Nah, like you said, I would kind of go for that B tier group of guys. I really like that B tier group of guys, and then maybe a younger guy, or maybe even if I can get one of these guys way, way later. Like say one of them happens to fall, like a David Njoku falls to a later part of the draft, like in 11th round, something like that. I could pick him up as well. But like you said, I'm not targeting any of these guys as my primary tight end as of right now, at least to find success in fantasy. You know what I mean? If I'm trying to go for a championship, I'm not sure if I really want these
Right.
guys down here unless, I don't know, unless this is the Kyle Pitts year. This is the year he makes us all shut up, but I don't think it will be.
So yeah, I was trying to find the ADP for David Njoku. Just found it. He's going as the 93rd overall player according to Fantasy Pros, which would put him kind of at the back end of the seventh round. Not quite as late as I would have thought. In the drafts that I've been in, I think he's been going a little bit later than that, like eighth, ninth round, which is much easier to stomach for me because I think he is a significant drop off from that B tier. So when I have guys like Darren Waller going in the sixth, I'd much prefer him one round earlier than a David Njoku. So yeah, I guess my advice would probably be to try to get one of those top three tier guys and mostly ignore these C tier guys.
Yeah, I agree with that because it's just if the price is like that, where it's the seventh round, I really go for that B tier and then try to build out my team from there.
Yeah. All right. Let's round this thing out. We have our D tier players. How many tight ends do we have ranked so far? One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10. So technically we only have two more in terms of, the top 12 rankings, but we can fill out this last group if you'd like. I guess I only have two more that would be in that tier for me, but we can talk about that as well.
Okay.
Who would your next guy be left in the D tier?
I've got Greg Dulcich here. I feel like this is a good
Okay,
spot for him right here.
I
So
like it.
just to give it some context, Greg Dulcich from week 16 last year as a rookie, he was the tight end 10 in fantasy scoring and the tight end 9 in expected points. And he had 5 top 12 scoring weeks over those 10 weeks, with 3 weeks that were lower than the tight end 16. So that's pretty good numbers for a rookie. But in terms of like the rates and stuff that he was working at, there's a lot of room for improvement still. Like in terms of target per route, he was 26th in target rate per route at 17.5%, and he was 25th in yards per route run with 1.3 over that span. So he was really efficient over that span. Didn't see a lot of volume in terms of his rates, and we hope to see that change, especially under Sean Payton this year. One of the things that's a bad thing about Greg Dulcich in terms of him blocking, I looked this up because it's something I feel like is important for tight ends because it keeps him out on the field. But Greg Dulcich, in terms of blocking, was 83rd out of 84 amongst the qualifying tight ends as a run blocker, which is why they added guys like Chris Manhertz and Adam Troutman to the roster because those are two block first guys. But in terms of
Yeah,
fantasy, you want to have a guy who's running routes, which is what Greg Dulcich is going to be out there
yeah,
doing, is running routes. So it's something that's going to stop him from being out there on the field because his lack of blocking could stop him from being a true breakout player because it will limit his time out there on the field. But in terms of what they do when he is out there and he is running routes, they do throw the ball in this direction and he is going to see some volume and he's going to see some success. It's just a matter of how much of it he's able to see.
yeah. I actually have some stats to back up exactly what you're saying, and kind of to encourage you guys to draft him a little bit more. Although he is a poor blocker, obviously we don't. A guy like George Kittle, who's probably the best blocking tight end in the league, we see, the difference in his total snap percentage versus his target percentage being a huge gap. Um, so even though Dulcich might have to be pulled off the field a little bit in blocking situations. When he is out there, he's fifth in route participation. He's
Mm-hmm.
sixth in slot snaps. He's third in average A dot, and he's third in deep targets. So we're seeing him, you know, high route participation, running tons of routes, in like super viable fantasy productive situations in the slot, and then also efficient and deep targets that are going to lead to those boom weeks that you love to see. And I think all of that efficiency is even going to take a bigger step up
Mm-hmm.
with Sean Payton coming to town. I think the entire offense is going to improve dramatically. So yeah, I expect a big second year jump for Greg Dulcich, but it's just tough to project him higher than this, really. Even though we say a breakout, it's tough to put him in the same range of guys that we've seen produce year in and year out.
Absolutely.
All right, so I like that a lot. I did have one guy slightly ahead of him, but it was really nitpicky, so I don't mind the rankings difference at all. The guy have next is Dalton Kincaid.
Okay. Nice. Nice. Nice.
Um, this is a similar situation. We just talked about Dulcich not being a great run blocker. Kincaid's never going to be used as a blocker, and he shouldn't be. But even maybe to a higher extreme than what we saw from Dulcich, all of the reports out of camp, all of the reports that we've heard since he's been drafted, is that he's a slot receiver. I think he's rarely going to play inline tight end. They've talked about, lining Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid up on the field regularly, where Knox is that more traditional inline tight end, and Kincaid is out there as a slot receiver. All of the training camp reports have been glowing, talking about how he moves unlike any tight end they've ever seen. He moves like an actual slot receiver. He's been running with the ones consistently. He's been Josh Allen's favorite target, and you know, I'm not going to buy into that like crazy. I think it's important to listen to that. Some of it's going to be smoke, but it's all really encouraging to hear, and that's also part of the reason why he's still down here at tight end 12 for us. He's not even higher than that. I just think that his upside is tremendous, and so even if there's a big gap between what his floor could be and what his ceiling could be, I'm willing to take that risk. In the ninth, 10th, 11th round of drafts.
Absolutely. I'm kind of looking at Dalton Kincaid as like the NFL's second try at Mike Gesicki, That sort of
Yeah,
tight end who was touted as a wide receiver, pretty much just a big wide receiver, who didn't really line up in line all too much. Like taking a look at even college, he lined up in line on 35.4% of snaps, which is the second lowest rate in the class, and
yeah,
55.1% of his snaps came lined up as a slot receiver. So like you're saying, like he should be out there lined up in the slot. He was highly productive in college from that perspective, from the slot. He was able to make it happen, get it done. So if they're able to make that happen out there in Buffalo with that high-powered offense, and they're using him the way that they're saying they're going to, is just a big slot receiver. Yeah, I could see him. One, I could see him easily outperforming this ADP if they use him as a receiver the way they want to, and with just the receiving
Yeah.
talent that he has. But having him down here and just taking a shot on him, I could absolutely see that. And that's one of those situations where I was talking about where you can get one of those B tier guys and maybe even get like a Dalton Kincaid way later in the draft just to take a shot on it and see what happens. And I feel like that's a very solid team.
Absolutely. That's something that I've been targeting and trying to do when I get a guy like Darren Waller, especially who I'm definitely nervous about in terms of an injury perspective. I've been targeting this D tier group of guys to go along with him. Um, so for me, that does kind of round it out. There are a couple names that I could definitely see being in this tier. Do you have anybody else that you want to nominate for the D tier?
Um, it's tough to really nominate people. There's people I'm looking out for sure, like some honorable mentions, like Sam Laporta for sure. Somebody I got to mention in every video with
Yep.
tight ends. But I do feel like he's going to be very
Love
involved in
Sam
this
Laporta.
offense, especially from the training camp reports we've seen. Is that a lot of passes are going in his direction? It's between him, Amon Ra, and Jameer Gibbs in terms of the most targeted people right now out there. Right? I think that's what the report was we saw.
Yeah. Yep.
Another person I'd like to throw my hat in there for, Mr. Michael Mayer, one of the most productive tight ends in college history. Landed with the Raiders, who have Devontae Adams, who's not very happy with the team. He plays in that more intermediate part of the field as well with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. He should see some success with that. Should see some targets with that. Things have been relatively quiet around Michael Mayer. They haven't been outright positive. They haven't been outright negative either, which kind of shows me he's going to go out there and do his job at the end of the day. So he's got some
Yeah.
competition he's got to beat out as well if he actually wants to get that nod. 'Cause I think they have Austin Hooper. Austin Hooper's over
Yeah.
there.
He's still got to take over the tight end one role.
Yeah. So with that being said, I can't quite throw him in here, but he's someone to keep an eye out for. Just really a lot of the young guys. In terms of veterans, I don't really have a lot besides maybe Juwan Johnson. He could get a nod for this spot as well. Someone we've seen
Yeah.
perform, but again, I don't think I would quite throw him in this tier either, especially with the additions
Yeah.
that they've
Some
made over there in New Orleans with like adding not Fabian Moreau, Foster Moreau. Fabian Moreau's
Foster
the corner.
Moreau.
Yeah.
Yeah. Added Foster Moreau. They brought in Jimmy Graham, which
hmm
probably doesn't matter at all. But and Taysom Hill's still there, and they're talking about now that they have Derek Carr. He's a full-time tight end. So
hmm
there's a lot of competition. I like Jawan Johnson a lot. I like what I saw from him last year. But yeah, there's I don't know too much going on in that tight end room for me to be super confident. Some other honorable mentions that aren't super exciting. Dalton Schultz, I think, deserves to at least be talked about. I think he's going to be a security blanket for CJ Stroud, but that's going to be such a run first offense and such an inefficient, low scoring offense that, you know, you might get somewhat consistent production, but it's going to be very low end and not difference making. I think Tyler Higbee is probably in a similar tier as well. He's going to be one of the most targeted tight ends in the NFL. It's just not going to be very, very efficient. He's probably not going to score a lot. And then the last guy that I think deserves to be talked about is probably Gerald Everett. With the improvements in this offense, I think we saw him be productive at times last year, and I think he has the chance to do that again. It's just there's a lot of mouths to feed there as well with Keenan
hmm
Allen, Quentin Johnston, Mike Williams. Those guys are going to absorb most of the targets. Austin Eckler as well. But if he gets some scraps, I think there could be some boom weeks in there for Gerald Everett.
I absolutely agree. And Tyler Higbee was somebody I did forget about. He did get sort of force fed last year in that new Rams system they had with all the, Cooper Cup
Yeah.
decoys, really. But he did get heavily fed last year, and that should probably continue this
Yeah.
year if they're running anyewhat of a similar game plan. So I do like Tyler Higbee too.
Yeah, he's been somebody that I've been targeting super late in drafts. If you miss out on all these guys, I think he's probably going to be the highest volume guy left on the board. And even as a tight end two on a roster with a Darren Waller or George Kittle or something like that, I'd be fine with adding him as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that'll wrap us up. That is our top 12 tight end rankings and tiers. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let us know down in the comments below if you guys agree with our tiers, where you guys disagree, who some of your favorite targets in drafts are, and what your strategy is going into the season, specifically at the tight end position. We'd love to know. We answer all the comments, so let us know. If you want a more in-depth discussion, you can check the link in the description below for our Discord. We can have a whole conversation over there, and not even just with us. We have a community of people over there that are really knowledgeable. We talk Dynasty, we talk Redraft, all that good stuff. So join the community, be part of it. We would be very happy to have you over there. Um, and then just to also talk about some other links in the description, we have our sponsors down there, League Winners, who we are partnered with. Go check out all of their new writers and stuff like that. They're pumping out a ton of content right now, fantastic fantasy content. So go check out their site. Underdog as well. You can use our promo code FFLW to get a 100% deposit match if you want to mock draft, best ball draft, all that good stuff over on Underdog. Do numbers if you're interested in some cool apparel, hoodies, t-shirts, hats, all that good stuff. We have a discount code down there below as well. And Dynasty Owner for a really cool and kind of unique Dynasty experience. We have a promo code for that. Go check all that good stuff out. But yeah, Will, you want to talk about the YouTube stuff?
Yeah, YouTube stuff. Make sure you guys do check out that League Winners channel because our new video is finally out over there. If you guys want to see any DeAndre Hopkins talk, that video is over there. It's live. You can check it out. But other than that, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That way you know when we drop all of our latest videos. Hit that like button. It's absolutely free, and it's the best way to support us, get our stuff out there. And like Eric said, let's start a conversation down in the comments below. If you got any questions about people, our placement of them, people you feel like were left out, people you feel like we shouldn't have even had on the list, let us know down below. Let us know what you think. Let's keep things civil, though, as best as we can. But let us know what you think down in the comments below. But with that being said, as always, if you made it this far into the video, we love you, and we will catch you in the next one. Peace.
Peace.